maybe the next phase, because I can tell you right now, like for me, I'm, of course, the young one in the group, but nobody's freaking retiring. You're going to have people kicking around for another 10 years, expand that pie so I can freaking move up the darn ladder.
Yeah. Bill's not even 40 yet, are you, Bill?
Oh, I don't even want to tell you what my age is.
Yeah.
He's pro-COVID, really. This is going to thin the herd.
Welcome to another episode of Consultants Saying Things. I'm Chris Lockhart. Today's episode is kind of interesting because it didn't actually start as an episode. Basically started with us in a pre-production meeting, and then I just started ranting about some issues I was having with the school system in this COVID era. We quickly went from our issues with the school system to issues with childcare to how are we going to return to work to all of the things that I know a lot of people are talking about out there. So we kind of turned it into an episode. So this is Bill, myself, Phil, Carol, Shashi, and we're talking about some of our issues that we have with COVID. Hope you enjoy it. I think there's some practical advice in there. Here we go.
So, Chris, you ready to put a nail in it and move on? Is that what I'm reading?
I'm over this whole thing. I think everything could have been done so much smarter, and not in an authoritarian way. But that depends on a smart, informed population, which we don't have. So,
yeah, the smart, informed government. We don't have that either. So,
well, a simple thing like if you're going to go out, just stay away from people. Like how
exactly, yeah.
Why did we have to shut off the modern era in order to make people, it's the same as with influenza. I mean, if you're going to go out and be around people during flu season, and someone's walking beside you and they got snot hanging all over the place and they're sneezing in your face. I mean, I don't know. I think common sense would have helped a lot more than destroying everything that we've been building for the past.
I think they ended up doing this whole lockdown thing to get a control because they were not prepared for this. So first step is, as Carol said, because of how the government was lack of preparedness and taking it seriously to bring it back in control. But now I think I agree with you, Chris. Like probably they could have, if people behave themselves the way they are supposed to, we could have been out of this little sooner. People are not. I was in my backyard right now with my daughter and kind of counting people far from people. Like out of 14 people, 7 people had masks, 7 did not have masks. It's like a 50% mask, as basic as that.
And you're in New York.
Yeah, no, I'm not in New York. I'm in New Jersey.
New Jersey. Yeah.
And it's a hot spot.
From here, they're the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
It's one big blob of coronavirus on the map.
Yeah, so people are like even not keeping 6 feet. You can say sometimes when my wife goes for grocery shopping, she complains of the people bumping into each other. And when you give them the stare that stay away, then they take it personally. Like this is insane. So I agree with you. Part of it is population. I was telling my daughter yesterday, we are not human beings. We are human bombs right now.
I think it's really difficult to prove a negative, right? How many people would have died if we didn't do the lockdown? Right?
Yeah, it's a soft number.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It's probably higher. I don't know, but I looking back, hindsight 2020, I think things could have been done differently. I think for me, what this has demonstrated is how utterly, completely, totally useless the public school system is. Because kids have learned more at home in the past few weeks than they ever could have learned in the school. I mean, talk about lowest common denominator teaching, right? Incredible. Here's the thing that really blows my mind. There are people advocating, and I think this is probably what's going to happen. We're just going to go back to the way it was before. No lesson learned, nothing, zero.
So that's what happened in 2008. That's what happens, right? So no, you are right. I'm surprised you are figuring that thing out around lowest common denominator. I mean, I am very, very close, very deeply ingrained into my daughter's education. So I'm so frustrated with the and they are still doing fractions in the class. They are in 6th grade. So she gets, I'm telling it lightly. But what she does is she doesn't like she shuts off the teacher when she's in virtual.
Yeah.
Like, and goes off, then does something else, because she thinks that why are we repeating the same thing like 10,000 times? Yeah. And to your point, school system is catering to lowest common denominator, and everybody else is getting hampered. And there is zero problem solving, Chris. They do, in maths, they don't do any problems. They do is mechanical maths, all computational stuff. No problem solving at all.
Phil, what's your experience? Are you deeply involved with the Google Meet and the Hangout and all that stuff?
It's a shit show. From my own perspective, right? Trying to sit in my kids' classes. And in fact, I just got off the phone with one of the, not the teacher, but someone who leads the teachers. I forget what they call it. She's not a counselor, but she's develops programs for it. And I was expressing not my frustrations, but I'm saying, as a parent, how do I intervene here to make sure that we don't end up next year being way behind? And of course, she said everybody's going to be way behind, but she also said, next year is not going to look the same. Basically they'll bring kids in for, they'll come into school for a day a week or maybe 2 days a week, depending on what's going on when they go to the e-learning platform, and what they do with them in the classroom will be completely different, because they'll be giving them a week's worth of work at a time, working them through the trouble, and then letting them go home and sort of socially isolate or whatever. So
how
anyway,
is childcare supposed to work around that? Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
if you're depending on the school for food and all the rest, or as you said, just having a place to park them. Yeah, no, your life will be different when we go back.
Don't you think that's going to be the norm, though? At some point, we were talking about that this morning. They can't shut down the economy again, or we'll cease to exist. And so you sit here going, we have to get used to the idea that there's going to be infections, and there's going to be people who are going to get really sick, and there's going to be people who get a little bit sick, and there's people who are going to walk around with it. And some are have masks and some won't. And I think we have to accept that that's part of the new norm. At least it is in my opinion. It's not, I don't think it's a great answer, but I don't think there is a good answer.
I think,
we don't have the political will to take on the hard stuff. That's kind of what's happening here.
I think in societies that are used to, working together in a harmonious fashion, whether it's a community-based society like a Chinese society or some of the Asian countries, or like the Scandinavian model I was talking about earlier, in those situations, I can see that some of these things would work. In our scenario, where, I don't know, what is it, 2/3 of the population spends more time watching the Kardashians than any news program, right? I find it extremely unlikely, right, that's going to happen. Yeah. That has nothing to do. Well, actually.
Well, I think it does.
Right.
It is part of the conversation. But, I think at a large, you're seeing a populace that's kind of been led to the places that the larger economic forces has wanted them to go. Our educational system is a response to the Industrial Revolution, right? Basically, let's teach them these things because what we're building is cogs to go in our machine. And if they fit in the machine, that's great. And if they don't, let's just spit them out. Let's discard them because we'll have plenty of cogs. And I think it has just led to us with a whole bunch of bad ideas, and this just we don't respond well to it, and it's not working, and there's not a good clear path to it because we've industrialized it. It's more than institutionalized, right? We have calcified around instructor-led training, and to the point that we believe in it so much. To Carol's point, we've wrapped child care. Basically, this is a place to park your kids during the day. We've wrapped feeding them. Some significant portion of the kids are getting their food from, their main meals of the day from school, right? Mm-hmm. And when something like that breaks, we don't blame ourselves. We blame the school. We don't blame ourselves for buying into the systems.
Yeah, it gets a little socio-political, right? But this idea that we've created a system where the education system, in this case, in this country, specifically the government, is parenting our children.
We've outsourced parenting.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's mob control in the classrooms.
Yeah, you kind of knew that. You kind of sort of, whatever. But, I got to work. And this and that. I think this crisis has highlighted for me, is it put in a spotlight on how much that's going on and actually how detrimental it really is. And I just see it, I'm just using it through the lens, no politics or anything else. I'm using it through the lens of the school experience through home. My kids are just so much more advanced, having had dedicated time with someone that gives a shit. And I know a lot of teachers do, but they also have 30 other kids that they gotta, right?
Not their fault.
Yeah, there's a system that's broken. It's not necessarily the teachers.
Right.
There's some burnouts in there, but yeah, it's a broken system.
Burnouts. Some burnout teachers.
Can you imagine? I'm sitting here picturing, I'm blessed in that I'm working with adults and I know what they care about and I get to focus on that. But I can't even imagine trying to be a 7th grade teacher where cell phones are the norm and now they're at home and you're trying to engage them in something they didn't want to learn in the first place.
Yes.
So
because the education isn't pointed at, here's what you need to, here's some skills that you can use to think, here's some skills you can use to reason that are put into a Game Boy, right? Those, you can get those from that. Go ahead.
You can compare it to two things. One is right now the education system is more like assembly line, right? So it's most like industrialized assembly line kind of, you have one teacher taking one grade and then it's like if quality of couple of teachers in between, either in the elementary school or middle school or high school is bad, then end quality of your product is a disaster. Whereas you make a handmade product, the Hermes of the world who's creating handmade, hand stitch, of course the quality of that is going to be greater. So I see that as assembly line and say this mass volume production versus handmade products. So that's the difference for me.
Absolutely. And now it's a matter of economic status. How do you get into that so that you can have the handmade product and who does it for them? And you've got to look at public policies and because nobody wants to pay for it.
I think, Chris, you mentioned a while ago that, the whole system is around what is a university? University provides you a platform where, demand meets supply. If somebody can disrupt that, then everything else will be secondary.
Well, I actually argued a little bit of the opposite.
Opposite of that, yes.
University system is totally disconnected from demand in the economy.
Yep.
And they're just churning the shit out, right? And what you end up with are, 40 million MBA students and,
$200,000 in debt.
Right, and 100,000 MBA jobs. It's like not everyone can go to college. Not everyone can go to college. There aren't enough college jobs for every single person to have a degree. It's crazy.
Yeah. But and not everybody should be in college. There are people who should be driven towards the trades where they would make so much more money and probably be happier. But it's everybody has to have a full scale. This is the education they have to have. And that's just crazy. Well, where are the apprenticeships?
This goes to, I mean, that's a whole topic unto itself, Shashi, which you brought up. But this goes to the idea that we're really talking about here, which is, everything that we've been doing, which we just assumed was the way it had to be done, right? We encountered a disruption with COVID. And now the question is, does anything change? What does go forward look like? Does anyone learn anything from this? Or do we just go back to the way it was? And if you're one of those people that you had your job disrupted because of this, lost your job, or your company's gone under, or you discovered you could make more on unemployment than you did as a waitress, or whatever the case may be, like what does that look like in a go forward fashion?
Yeah, but the next one is so damn scary, Chris. It's scarier than any virus, because I've had 2 calls this week from massive clients who are about to go into significant layoffs, and they're asking, "Do I know anybody? How do I hook them up? Is there anybody in our area that's hiring?" And Phil and I have had this conversation about Tech After 5, because a lot of these folks are in the technical or engineering fields. But, I think the storm that's coming is so much bigger than the virus, because the virus was terrifying in its own unknowns. So now what are we doing? How are we helping clients to retool, reset? And how are we helping all this fear that's going on in mass quantity? And we're just at the beginning. I mean, we're just at the very beginning of how many people are about to be laid off, as far as I can see.
And Carol, I think laying off, that's one argument I have, that laying off people is a knee-jerk reaction, which will come back and bite them. Are they taking away cost, which is anyway going to come back in a couple of months?
It's aviation. It's aviation. that's a hard argument to have. What else can you cut?
Yeah.
And, nobody's flying. Nobody's buying planes. I mean, it's just backed up.
Yeah,
so that's just one of them. And both of them are in manufacturing in some version. And nobody's buying. So I hear you for sure. But
what are some of those things, Carol, when you're talking to clients? What are you, and I know you're sort of more in the executive communication side of the house, but how are you helping them think through these things when you're talking to them?
Well, I'm talking to, I'll be, straightforward. The conversations around layoffs, I'm talking more to the people who are doing the dirty work and swinging the axe than I am to the people who are making the decisions about it. So I'm not these are companies that are a level that I'm not in the C-suite with at this point. They're not asking me how I feel. What I'm trying to do is help the people who are swinging the axe to talk to people about redesigning their expectations. Because if you've been in aviation for the past 20 years and your dad was in aviation and your granddad was in aviation, the bottom line is you need to figure out how to reskill, how to re-represent yourself in a different way. What do your skills really come down to? Because you can't use the word aviation anymore because there's nobody in that industry hiring. So now how are you reskilling and how are you avoiding this dip where back in the day, if you got laid off and in a different scenario, you might have had a 6-month, 12-month window when you could kind of regroup, get through the grief, whatever there might be going on. Today, you can't. Today, it's have your resume ready. If you've been furloughed, have your resume ready. Be out there meeting recruiters, talking about what you need to do to upskill, possibly. In the case of executives, they need to go out, and I've had this conversation too with Phil. Every executive needs to understand Zoom, Teams, whatever platform their company is working on or their recruiter is working on. They need to upskill into being really solid online leaders because that's who's going to win this. Now, the industry that you're in is also going to drive who wins. And obviously, tech is going to win this first battle because everybody's talking about data and security. And I think those are the industries to be in. But for the folks we had Hertz did an 80% layoff. Where are they going in the travel and hospitality industry? They're not. So they're going to have to take a look at their skills and decide where they can fit. That is the next natural fit. And some of them are going to need more education. Probably not university, Zoom, right? Or YouTube, or they're going to have to figure out where they fit in that other world.
But it's funny. I was just listening to NPR today, and they're talking about that exact same thing. So the California education system's changing a lot of what they're doing. They're actually taking a lot of conscious step forward to looking at online education. But what's interesting is when you talk to them, it was less about what happened with COVID and more is using this as an opportunity to help underprivileged individuals that don't traditionally get opportunities to get an education. So for example, they're talking about getting rid of the ACTs and SATs because yes, while it is a great metric to figure out how to compare people, the economic reality is a lot of people that do really well have the capabilities of doing test prep and test study. And as we know, you drive that out to different economies, you have different folks that are adversely affected. What I think is interesting about that whole concept, stepping back from just that argument in general, is changing the way we are looking and going forward. I think once this, let's say, passes, I don't think anything's going to pass. My personal perspective, it's just going to become more common. You're going to have people who are now starting to innovate in different areas, starting to look at online education because there was some feedback from people who are paying like $30,000 a year. Like, I'm going to go to a community college, pay $500 a credit hour as opposed to $2,000 a credit hour because why pay $2,000 when I'm just going to be online? So you're going to change consumer preferences, but also in that aspect. But I think you're going to start to see the innovation. I don't think things will come to fruition in 18 months. I think it's going to be a 5-year cycle. But you'll start seeing changes in education. But I'd almost say, and why I believe the inertia is going to be there, is look at the medical industry. And I compare the education industry to medical industry and how things are regulated and why they move so slow. Is because I believe you have a lot of entrenched interests in place that keep that inertia, keep a level of inertia there that wouldn't necessarily be there because of safety, or throw your buzzword out that makes people feel like it's risky to do whatever they're doing or to make change. That's what they're promulgating is that, I don't know if that's the right word.
Well, so what you're talking about, back to Phil's question, like, does it matter if Chris Lockhart doesn't want to talk about COVID anymore? It still exists, right? And it still impacts everything. And I think that's, so, I mean, that really is the question on the table, right? So, like, what are you going to do differently, or can you do differently, given this, to, if you're me, right, and you want to move on, like, I'm done with this, let me move on. What do I do? How do I do it? Can I do it? Is it even possible? I don't know.
I go back to living like I go back to my own inertia, and then I figure out how my own inertia is upset. Like, what can I not do now that I could have done before?
Yep.
To a large degree, I can do everything I could do before. I mean, except get a haircut right now because it's really backpacked, and maybe in the next couple of months eat some meat because the meat processing, the supply chain is going down. But has it really changed anything I'm doing? No. I'm in Florida. I'm going back to the beach this weekend. Yes, you have 6 feet apart, but when's the last time you were at a beach that you had groups of people closer than 6 feet? You don't really like sit on top of each other.
Josh is calling BS.
Josh is calling BS. We can't hear him.
Like, you can't hear him.
Can't hear you, buddy. What happened?
You're on mute.
Where's that?
Saying on Jersey Beach, it's less than 6 feet.
Oh, God, yeah. Hilton Head is practically on top of each other in a way they never have been, by the way. Jersey's always been like that, but Hilton Head hasn't, and it's crazy. It's like people just got out of jail, and they've gone bananas, and now they're going to, it has gone so far the other way.
So the right way for me, so
I don't go
there is a central government lockdown, then you have state government lockdown, and then you have an individual lockdown. So my individual lockdown equal to government lockdown plus 1 month. Let people be crazy. Let people vent it out for another 1 month. And then I'm going to start going out and probably try to be a lot more normal. That way is, let them, because people are going crazy right now. Like they are.
So you're imposing your own lockdown, the Shashi.
Yes.
Lockdown.
One month extra. Let people go through whatever they need to, whatever they want to. Let them vent it out.
Yeah, you do.
So that's the worst situation. Right now, it's safe to go out because people, most of it, like at least 50% of the people are following, and nobody's stepping out.
In your area, maybe.
Yeah.
I think everybody that wants to go out should go out, and if they get sick, that's their risk to take. I'm okay with that. Let them all go out. If every last Trump voter wants to go out, I'm okay with that. Because it's all an experiment. We don't know. We've got statistics coming from every possible direction, and any good data point can be turned any direction you want it to be. So I just think you go, do what you want to do, and we'll see what happens. And I understand there's high risk folk out there, and I think they should take less risk.
Well, I would say
that's an interesting, a very libertarian point of view, and I understand that. But what happens when the dead and the sick overwhelm the hospital system?
Yes, then normal people can't go. Normal people can't go. Like, for example, I have this crown which I need to fit in, and I haven't been to the doctor for 2 months, so I'm on a temporary crown. So it's not urgent, but somebody has regular checkup and regular dialysis or anything of that sort. You are clogging the medical system.
Well, there was a cartoon that said, then we just, if you want to be out, if you're going to protest and you want to be out and run around spinning on people, then you shouldn't get medical care. You should simply get a nice little tattoo on your forehead that says, I made this choice and you can't get in. You're right. I don't know how to distinguish that. I don't have an answer for that. But I still think that there has to be some level of freedom in this choice because we don't understand really what we're asking people to do from an economic perspective and from any other social perspective.
We have been taking a lot more conservative approach, but I think even in New York, honestly speaking, when I hear the mayors speak, they're talking about opening, they're talking about, there's less about COVID cry as compared to how they want to open it, and everybody eventually is opening up, and they will see how it goes for next month or 2 months, and then we'll see where it goes.
I mean, at the end of the day, this was the epitome of a black swan event. This is not our perception for this to happen. People say they could have predicted it, yes and no. Everybody says they could predict it.
I'm just calling bullshit on that. That is nonsense. It is nothing like a black swan event. Everyone saw it coming. Nobody wanted to do anything about it. That is what happened. Yes, this has been predicted. We had movies about it. Come on, Bill. We cannot claim that we were too stupid to see this coming.
We can claim we were too stupid. We can always claim that.
The concept of black swan has nothing to do with being too stupid. It's the perspective. And there's a lot of people who talked about before the meltdown, the 2008 meltdown happened. So when people talk about probabilities and future and predicting the future, the first thing about predictions are always wrong. And so we have people talking about this for years as opposed to something that could possibly happen. So if there's a probability something will happen, like there always is, there's a probability it can happen. So at the end of the day, we have somebody sitting here saying this is exactly what could happen, when and whatnot. I mean, this is not a Simpsons thing. I know the Simpsons predicted it. I mean, it seems
hell of a prediction. Yes,
it's one is the financial disaster. 2008 was a financial disaster, and it's relatively easier to come back from that versus the health disaster we are in now, because the consumer behavior ridiculously changes. So now consumer behavior is going to change for good for a long period of time. There will be a lot of opportunity.
Can I just one other piece, by the way? I just think it's an interesting observation to your specific point, Bill. I was in a call last week with a guy who sold business continuity insurance. He was an insurance salesman, whatever. And he sold insurance. He sold business continuity insurance. And I asked, well, what are you doing? And he said, I'm explaining to everybody why business continuity insurance doesn't cover pandemics, because it's clearly stated in the insurance, it does not cover pandemics. So if you said we couldn't see this coming, why did we write that into the insurance to begin with?
Somebody decided they didn't want a pandemic. At the end of the day, this is a pandemic this big. Who said we're specifically going to have this type of coronavirus that starts in China or wherever it started? Debate and how it spreads in this. Yes, the biggest things you have, these things are happening every couple of years. You had MERS, you had SARS, but who predict? So I go back when people are like, "Oh, I predicted." When it comes true, then they saw the future. No, because how many people try to predict the future and they're absolutely wrong? You don't hear about them. If something happens to happen.
No, you react based on the implications of the prediction. Like implication of whatever happened in the financial crisis was relatively manageable, but implications of a pandemic spreading this much is ridiculous. So it's government's duty to.
We don't have the hindsight yet to say whether this is worse or better or worse than what happened in 2008. We're in the middle of something happening.
We'll wait and watch. It definitely is.
Wait and watch.
There is this idea, right? Like people like Bill Gates and stuff like that, right? You had a famous quote about a pandemic in 2015. I think, yeah, absolutely. People were predicting pandemics were possible and likely and going to happen at some point. But I don't know that I haven't seen anyone really predicting the level of disruption, supply chain to the society. We're one short step away from political socio chaos, right? I mean, I don't think anyone really predicted that would happen in a developed economy like this country.
You may well be right. Let me just say, 2 years ago, I went back and I read Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. And her whole thing was, she said what inspired her to write the book was that society was this thin veneer and people didn't realize how little it would take to completely disrupt and allow something else to emerge. And that was the point of her writing the book. She was afraid of that because she had traveled enough to say, oh, this causes me great concern. I understand, Chris. And I just want to say, I don't want to let everybody off the hook. I get it. If your pay grade, my pay grade, us, right? That's not the thing we spend a lot of time thinking about. But there are sophisticated systems thinkers and academics who had the opportunity and actually said, I think this could happen. And it could be very disruptive. Exacting, I get they don't get the exact bit, but someone saw that bit. And the only reason I take such umbrage, I feel like the rule that I saw Bill break is I felt like this was in fact predictable. And some people said, you know what, we don't have the political will to build a defense against it. So we're just not going to do that right now. We're going to pretend it couldn't happen and we'll just take our lumps as we go. Yeah. I mean, heck, I've done that in my business, right? There are things I haven't, there are risks I have not insured my enterprise against, saying that if I take the beating, I'll take the beating and I'll just have to figure it out. I'm not willing to build a defense against it at this moment. That was my point, by the way. And I just don't want to let people off the hook.
So, all right. So let's pivot away from this for just a second, right? So given all of that, and given what Carol was talking about how she was advising her clients on how to handle these things, with all of that, how do you handle coming out of this and moving forward? I mean, Shashi, what do you see in consulting? By the way, I love your virtual background. I think that's fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
Ah, well done. I didn't know it was virtual. Well done.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
So see, the part of business which I'm running, so we definitely will see, number one, more layoffs coming or salary cuts or furloughs happening, but that will be temporary because consulting is people's business. Now, it will not be easy for organizations or the end clients to hire people back in a very short time frame, but then they will be in restructuring and turnaround situation. Restructuring around, do they have enough cash to run their business? That is the first one. And that's where they will go in the cost cutting mode and letting people go and then shutting down or divesting part of the business. So there will be a section of people who will be in high demand, people who are in the transaction business, people who are in the restructuring and turnaround type of business in a short period of time. But in the long run, again, people would be required, consultants would be required to help organizations further grow. There will be a short dip for next 3 to 6 months. I'm seeing a slowdown in our part of the business right now. People are in the wait and watch mode. But people need to, will be required. They need to develop more skills around digital and technology. That's number one. And second thing is they need to be more disciplined to work in a virtual environment where they don't have to travel, they don't have to interact with clients, because we feed off from client reaction being there in person. That is going to happen less and less over the next year or so. It's probably as good for the clients, reason being less travel cost, like straight away you save 15 to 20% of your project cost. Some consultant may not like it.
And you lower the risk too, right? Because you're inviting somebody in who supposedly is out there business hopping. The last thing in the world is you want him coming in and infecting your group. So I think we've been, the groups that I've talked to, consultants, have basically said we're not expecting to be on a plane for the rest of 2020. It might happen, but we don't see it immediately.
So many companies are saying they are, at least 50%, or they will completely go virtual. The big companies are saying in next year or two. But I would recommend all the consultants right now to take this as an opportunity to reskill themselves, retool themselves over the next couple of months, and become more relevant for future demand. Because Bill, you mentioned it. I think there will be huge disruptions in the field of education, huge disruptions in the field wherever the consumer interactions with healthcare. Number one, yes, anywhere where there is a consumer interaction, that needs to be reimagined, which will require different type of skill sets. So just be prepared for the demand. People have to take a dip for a few months, but there will be demand going forward. Whether it's a V-shaped curve, whether it's a U-shaped, like 100,000 different consulting curves we can talk about, but it's going to bounce back. So be ready for it.
Your advice is to upskill. Is that it?
Upskill, and be ready for what's going to come.
Yeah, and look at different industries and how you can impact them. I absolutely with you, Sashi. I'm hearing, retailers are they're on their ears, right? I got an email from Macy's saying we're open, and I thought, that isn't really addressing the problem here. But I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to save the brick and mortar, and I think in the end, brick and mortar is going to really shift as to what we're looking at and how, which is also means that entertainment is going to be heavily impacted, and look at everybody that's in on that. And then there's the whole Zoom piece where Apple Docs just came out. What are you doing and how are you securing it? I think that's going to have just unbelievable ramifications. Zoom is agreed across the board that it is the best thing. And my biggest client, the one with 200,000 global employees, won't touch it because they're terrified of the security. So anybody that can get in this and establish and prove their security is going to have a huge leg up in this reimagined world we're heading into. Yep. And you can do all that from home.
That's the whole part. So,
Phil, is upskilling enough? Phil.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said Bill. Did you say Phil or Bill?
Yeah.
I said
Phil.
Yeah.
It's like repeat.
I don't think I'm not even sure it's necessary. in my bit, I think that it's a valuable thing in that moment if you have that opportunity, right? If you're saying, look, I'm well padded, I don't need this work at the moment. There are things that I felt like are shortages, gaps in my own skill set from where I want to be. I applaud that, right? Now, to Carol's point, if I have the technical skills, but not the communication skills in order to communicate with the people that I want to work for, I need to solve that problem right away, right? That is urgent. Red flag, red alert. Let's do something about that right now. Get good at it, however you need to get good at it. I suggest you practice. Don't read about it. Practice it somehow. Low stakes poker games. Get in on them and figure that out, right? That's what I've been doing. I think those bits you got to do. But I think right now, let's imagine if you were in that spot and you said, I've been furloughed, or for whatever reason, I am out of work and I got to find the thing that's next. I think right now, my goal is to go find the bright spots in the economy at this moment and figure out who needs my help right now. Because that's an opportunity to sort of latch in and figure out what that is. And again, if you are latching in to where demand is current, and we talk to recruiters all the time, right? Certain parts of the economy have slowed or stopped. There are others that are just rolling right along. But if you can find yourself in that spot, you might find that what you imagine to be your technical skill gap may be different than what you thought. Right. And in that case, you might want to use those guys as the measuring stick for what you learn next, as opposed to where you came from. I think there's a risk that we all spend our time trying to fight the last war. My advice is always stay in the action, go to where the action is, help the people who need your help now, if that's what you need to do, and learn what you need to learn to get that job done. That's my piece on that. And it's a little bit of a different shift from Shashi, but I think it's just focusing. He said upskill. I'm saying upskill for where the work is. Right. And certainly upskill to what Carol said. If you can't communicate, if you aren't comfortable getting on a Zoom call, if you can't make all of this happen, you need to figure that out, because otherwise you're just going to I will look out to you. I will say, I need your help, and you can't respond. And I'll go, I don't think that's the cat for me. Let me find someone who can.
Yeah, you're not cutting edge enough. And if you can't be cutting edge enough, then you become obsolete. And that's too easy to do, especially if you're 50 years old. It's too easy to be obsolete. 50 is that was back then. So I'm okay saying that. I can throw that stone. But truly, I'm watching people 45, 50, and 45 is the youngest. But, what are you doing? I've got a wonderful speaker. This guy is a leader that people would take a bullet for. And he's been with his company for 30 years now, and he's in that age bracket that's going to be really hard to repurpose. And he's very, very good at what he does. And so we're hoping to get him out there and hopefully there are leaders who are listening and recruiters who are listening who realize that just because you're good at one industry doesn't mean that those skills aren't applicable to other industries. Exactly. A great leader is a great leader is a great leader.
Yeah. And a great project manager is a great project manager, because exactly. Core of that. So you always have some set of horizontal skills, which is applicable in any industry. And then you have specialized skill, which is for each industry. So those are the skills probably you need to learn. Some of the horizontal skills would also change, but there is a lot you have learned in your industry, which you can apply in something else. So probably you will be more valued because you'll bring in a fresh new perspective.
So
yeah, especially in consulting.
Bill Bensing, what's the go-ahead plan here?
Get your haircut?
I want to say one controversial thing first.
Uh-oh.
There's no such thing as a good project manager.
Having technical difficulties.
This is for Hussein Bandukwala.
Just don't mistake that with project management is useless. I highly think project management skills are a necessity. I just don't believe in project managers.
We won't tell Hussein who we talked to last year.
But it's just funny you guys are talking about the skills and upskills, and I'm going through here and I'm looking, as you're talking about like some folks that are, I have to I'll pull the young card, but like you look at some of this and less skilled people that are going to have a hard time moving into the areas. So yes, you want to upskill. I feel I'm there with you, upskill in the areas where the value is. But maybe this is the entrepreneur in me. Just create new value for that client that you have. Like if that individual can speak and they can move and they can motivate, they have to be able to work with a team to create a value proposition that doesn't exist. So find the problems, find the opportunities. There's a ton of it going around right now. Like, let's look at Zoom right now. Actually, I'm going to put this out there because this is something I may be working on the side. But like right now, if I want to share my screen or something like that, like think about using Zoom. Actually, it sucks. GoToMeeting sucks as well because it's not easy for us to like swap in and out. What if you had something simple that's on your side? Like I used to start using something called Ecamm, where although Zoom will not use my virtual cam through Ecamm, but I could share my screen top and show you things without you having to share your screen with me. So like that's a value proposition. How many meetings have you got in where you're like passing the ball to somebody and it's horrible? So I'll bring it back to yes, you got to upskill, figure out where the problem's at, upskill to that problem. But also, this is the opportunity for people who are, maybe at the next phase. Because I can tell you right now, like for me, I'm, of course the younger one in the group, but nobody's freaking retiring. You're gonna have people kicking around for another 10 years, and that's something that as I look at it, like we have to become used to. So expand that pie so I can freaking move up the darn ladder.
No, I
absolutely.
think this so
Bill's not even 40 yet, are you, Bill?
Oh, I don't even want to tell you what my age is.
Yeah,
he's pro COVID. Really, this is going to thin the herd.
So I think this will spawn a new thread or new set of billionaires in the industry, and you could be one of them. You sitting and listening to us could be one of them.
I hope they don't have to give me any money. They just be like, listen, we saw this consulting saying things episode with these folks on it, and it was amazing. And that's why I'm worth $1 billion today. That's all we need.
There you go.
All because of that one idea and because of COVID. Fantastic. All right. I think that's probably good right there. That was a lot of different topics all in the same vein. Hopefully, I would like it to be sort of the last COVID focused thing that we do, but who knows what will happen, right? So anyway, thanks everybody. Thank you, Carol Hamilton, Phil Yanoff, Shashi Shremali, Bill Bensing. I'm Chris Lockhart. Thanks. See you next time.
Peace.